Welcome to a documentary experience defined by absolute transparency. We guarantee that the upcoming scenes are entirely unfiltered and unedited. This is raw, immersive footage from the front lines of justice, providing an unpolished look at those who uphold the law.
Step out of the vehicle now! I don't care about your excuses!
Officer, please state the reason for this stop. I am asking for your probable cause.
I know what you're trying to do! You think your title protects you? You think I won't put you in cuffs?
I am a federal judge. You are violating my rights.
The dashboard camera clicked on at 11:47 p.m., capturing the moment that would end a 23-year police career in less than 15 minutes. Officer Kyle Brennan had no idea the woman in the silver Mercedes he just pulled over was about to become his worst nightmare. She wasn't drunk, she wasn't speeding, she hadn't broken any law. But she was black, driving through an affluent neighborhood, and in Brennan's mind, that was reason enough. Judge Simone Harper had spent the evening at a charity gala for the Children's Legal Defense Fund, an event she attended every year. She'd had exactly one glass of champagne during the cocktail hour, hours ago. She was wearing an elegant navy dress, pearl earrings her mother had given her, and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from 20 years on the federal bench. She was 2 miles from her home when she saw the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Her first thought was confusion. She checked her speedometer. 32 in a 35 zone. Turn signals had been used. She hadn't drifted lanes or done anything remotely questionable. She pulled over smoothly, put the car in park, and placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Force of habit from a lifetime of knowing that black skin and traffic stops can be a deadly combination. Brennan approached the driver's side window with his flashlight already drawn, shining it directly into Simone's face before she could even lower the window. The light was blinding, intentionally aggressive. When she finally got the window down, he was already speaking in that particular tone cops use when they've decided you're guilty of something. "Step out of the vehicle. I need you to step out right now." Simone kept her voice level and professional. "Officer, can you tell me why you pulled me over?" The question seemed to irritate him. "I said step out of the vehicle. Don't make me repeat myself." This is where most people would comply. Fear does that. Authority does that. But Simone Harper wasn't most people. She'd prosecuted corrupt officials, presided over constitutional challenges, and defended civil liberties in courtrooms across the country. She knew exactly what was happening here. "I'm asking you a simple question. What is the reason for this stop?" Brennan's jaw tightened. His hand moved to his belt, hovering near his weapon in a gesture designed to intimidate. "I smell alcohol. You're swerving. I have probable cause for a DUI investigation. Now get out of the car before I remove you myself." Every word was a lie, and they both knew it. The dashboard camera would later show Simone's vehicle never swerved once. The distance between them made smelling anything impossible. There was no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion, nothing but a black woman in an expensive car and a cop who couldn't tolerate that image in his neighborhood. Simone did something extraordinary then. She started documenting everything out loud. "Officer, for the record, I have not been drinking. Beyond one glass of champagne approximately 4 hours ago. I was not speeding or swerving. I'm asking you again to state your probable cause for this stop, as is my constitutional right." The mention of constitutional rights seemed to flip a switch in Brennan. That's when he went from aggressive to dangerous. He yanked the door open before Simone could react. His hands grabbed her arm, pulling her from the vehicle with force completely disproportionate to the situation. Simone stumbled in her heels, catching herself against the car. She didn't resist. She didn't fight back. She simply continued speaking clearly. "I am not resisting. I am complying under protest. You are using excessive force for a traffic stop without stated probable cause." Brennan spun her around, pressing her against the hood of her own car. The metal was cold through her dress. He grabbed her wrists, pulling them behind her back with unnecessary roughness. The handcuffs clicked shut, tight enough to hurt. "You've got a real attitude problem, you know that? Think you're better than everyone else? Think the law doesn't apply to you?" Simone turned her head slightly, enough to make eye contact. The calm in her voice never wavered. "I'm a federal judge for the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. My name is Simone Harper. You were violating my civil rights and falsely detaining me without cause. I suggest you call your supervisor immediately." For exactly 3 seconds, Brennan froze. His face went through a sequence of emotions that the dashboard camera captured in perfect detail. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something that looked like panic, then anger covering the panic. "Sure you are. And I'm the president. Let me guess, you're also a doctor and an astronaut?" He actually laughed. Not nervous laughter, but genuine mockery. He'd decided this was some kind of con, a sophisticated lie from someone trying to talk their way out of a DUI. In his mind, federal judges didn't look like the woman handcuffed against this Mercedes. Federal judges certainly didn't drive through his neighborhood at midnight. What Brennan didn't know was that Simone Harper had been appointed to the federal bench by a unanimous Senate confirmation. She'd argued cases before the Supreme Court. She'd written landmark opinions on Fourth Amendment rights that were taught in every law school in the country. She literally wrote the legal precedent on unlawful stops and searches. "Check my credentials. They're in my purse. My identification is in my wallet. My judicial ID is in the front pocket. 5 minutes of verification will confirm everything I'm telling you." Brennan pulled her away from the car instead, walking her toward his patrol vehicle. "I'll check whatever I want after we do the field sobriety test. You're going to blow into a breathalyzer, and we'll see how federal you really are." The sarcasm dripped from every word. He genuinely believed he was dealing with an imposter, someone using a fake title to intimidate him. The alternative, that he'd just assaulted a sitting federal judge without cause, was too catastrophic for his mind to accept. Simone stood under the streetlight, hands cuffed behind her back, and made a decision. She stopped talking. Not because she was afraid, but because she understood something Brennan didn't. Every second of this encounter was being recorded. Every illegal action, every rights violation, every false statement was being preserved in digital clarity. Words wouldn't save her now. The evidence would. Brennan retrieved his breathalyzer from the patrol car, the cheap roadside version that defense attorneys love to challenge in court. He held it up like a trophy, smirking as he approached. "Open your mouth. Let's see what the federal judge blows." Simone complied. She breathed into the device steadily, maintaining eye contact the entire time. The machine beeped. Brennan looked at the display. His smirk disappeared. 0.00. Completely sober. Not even a trace of alcohol in her system. The champagne from 4 hours ago had metabolized completely. Brennan stared at the device like it had betrayed him, then made it worse. Machine must be broken. "We'll do a blood test at the station." That's when Simone spoke again, and her voice carried weight that made even Brennan hesitate. "Officer Brennan, your name is on your badge. This dashboard camera has recorded everything from the moment you pulled me over without cause. The breathalyzer shows I'm completely sober. You have no probable cause, no evidence of impairment, and no legal justification for this stop or detention. You are now compounding your violations by refusing to release me despite exculpatory evidence. I'm giving you one final opportunity to end this before it destroys your career." The words hung in the night air. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car drove past, the driver slowing to look at the scene. Brennan's radio crackled with dispatcher traffic about a domestic disturbance 3 blocks away. He should have released her right then. Any reasonable officer would have recognized the situation was spiraling beyond control. But Brennan had gone too far to back down now. Pride, ego, and something uglier kept him committed to the path he'd chosen. "Get in the car. You're going to the station for a blood draw and booking for DUI and resisting arrest." Simone didn't argue anymore. She let him put her in the back seat of the patrol car, the plastic seat cold and uncomfortable. She sat perfectly still as he drove, watching the streets pass by, already thinking 3 steps ahead. What Brennan didn't realize during that 12-minute drive was that Simone's phone, still in her purse in her Mercedes, had been on a call the entire time. She'd activated the voice dial feature when she first saw the lights, calling her clerk's emergency line. Every word of the encounter had been transmitted and recorded on a separate device beyond Brennan's control. The station was quiet when they arrived, just after midnight. A few officers milling around, paperwork being filed, the usual late-shift routine. Brennan walked Simone inside like he'd just caught a major criminal, chest puffed out, confident in his actions. The desk sergeant looked up from his computer, saw the woman in the elegant dress and handcuffs, and something in his expression shifted. The sergeant's nameplate read, Kowalski, and his eyes moved from Simone's face to her designer dress, then to Brennan with a question forming on his lips. What's the charge? DUI and resisting arrest. She refused field sobriety tests and was uncooperative throughout the stop. Kowalski's eyebrows went up. The breathalyzer? 0.0. Machine's defective. I'm requesting a blood draw. Something in that exchange made Kowalski stand up from his chair. He walked around the desk, moving slowly, studying Simone with the kind of attention that comes from years of experience, recognizing when something doesn't add up. Ma'am, what's your name? Judge Simone Harper. I serve in the Federal District Court, Southern Division. I was pulled over without cause approximately 30 minutes ago while driving home from a colleague's retirement dinner. I submitted to a breathalyzer, which confirmed I'm completely sober. Officer Brennan has refused to release me despite having zero evidence of any violation. The station went quiet. Every officer within earshot stopped what they were doing. Pens froze mid-signature. Conversations died mid-sentence. Someone dropped a coffee cup, the ceramic shattering against the tile floor with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Kowalski's face went pale. He looked at Brennan like someone had just told him his partner had brought a live grenade into the building. You arrested a federal judge? She's lying. Probably stolen the identification. Criminals do it all the time. But Kowalski was already moving to the computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. He pulled up the federal court website, navigated to the judges section, and there she was. Photograph, biography, appointment history. Appointed by the president 3 years ago. Previously served as assistant U.S. attorney for 8 years. Harvard Law, top of her class. Recipient of numerous legal awards and commendations. Kowalski turned his monitor so Brennan could see it. That's her. Brennan stared at the screen. For the first time since the traffic stop, genuine fear flickered across his face. But it lasted only a moment before the defiance returned. Doesn't matter who she is, she still broke the law. What law? Kowalski's voice had an edge now. What did she do? She was swerving, driving erratically. Your dash cam will show that? Brennan hesitated. It should. It should? Or it does? Kowalski was already pulling up the patrol car footage. The system was networked, automatically uploading video to the department's servers. He found Brennan's car, located the timestamp, and pressed play. Everyone in the station gathered around. They watched Simone's Mercedes maintaining perfect lane discipline. They watched it signal properly before changing lanes. They watched it stop completely at a stop sign, wait the appropriate time, then proceed. They watched Brennan's patrol car follow for 8 blocks without the Mercedes doing anything remotely resembling erratic driving. Then they watched Brennan hit his lights. Kowalski stopped the video. He looked at Brennan with an expression that combined disbelief and fury. Where's the swerving? It was before I started recording. Your camera activates automatically when you leave the parking lot. We both know that. The system has glitches. Convenient. Kowalski turned to another officer. Get Lieutenant Vasquez down here right now. While they waited, Kowalski removed Simone's handcuffs himself, apologizing with every word. The other officers kept their distance, none of them wanting any connection to what was unfolding. They'd all seen careers end before, but this had the potential to be spectacularly destructive. Lieutenant Carmen Vasquez arrived within minutes, her uniform hastily straightened, clearly having been woken from sleep. She listened to Kowalski's summary, watched the dashcam footage, and her jaw tightened with each passing second. When the video ended, she turned to Brennan with barely controlled rage. My office. Now. What happened in that office over the next 40 minutes would become the subject of internal affairs reports, legal depositions, and eventually federal court testimony. Brennan tried to justify his actions. He claimed he'd made an honest mistake, that the judge had been suspicious, that her refusal to comply had given him no choice. Vasquez tore apart every excuse with surgical precision. You had no probable cause for the stop. Your own camera proves that. You conducted field sobriety tests on someone who clearly wasn't impaired. You arrested a federal judge after a breathalyzer confirmed she was sober. You falsified the reason for the stop. You ignored exculpatory evidence. You made false statements to your desk sergeant. Every sentence was a nail in Brennan's career coffin. Meanwhile, Simone sat in the station waiting area, declining offers of coffee or water, simply sitting with perfect posture while officers avoided eye contact. One younger officer, barely out of the academy, approached nervously. "Ma'am, I just want to say I'm sorry this happened. That shouldn't have happened to anyone, especially not to you." Simone's expression softened slightly. "What's your name, officer?" "Taylor, ma'am. Officer Melissa Taylor. How long have you been on the force, Officer Taylor?" 6 months. "Let me give you some advice that will serve you well. When you see something wrong, don't participate in it. Don't enable it. Don't look away from it. What happened tonight didn't start with the traffic stop. It started with years of similar stops that nobody questioned, nobody reported, nobody challenged. Be better than that." Taylor nodded, the lesson sinking in, before retreating to her desk. When Vasquez finally emerged from her office, Brennan followed behind her, his badge and weapon already surrendered. She walked directly to Simone. "Judge Harper, Officer Brennan has been suspended pending a full internal affairs investigation. The department will be conducting a comprehensive review of his arrest record and body camera footage. We will cooperate fully with any legal action you choose to pursue. On behalf of the department, I apologize for this egregious violation of your rights." Simone stood, gathering her composure. "Lieutenant, I want copies of all documentation related to tonight's incident. The dashcam footage, the breathalyzer results, the arrest report, booking photos, everything. I also want a list of every traffic stop Officer Brennan has conducted in the past 3 years, with particular attention to demographic data." Vasquez didn't hesitate. "You'll have everything by end of business tomorrow. And Lieutenant, I want to know how many complaints have been filed against Officer Brennan and how they were resolved." The question hung in the air because everyone in that station already knew the answer. Multiple complaints had been filed over the years, all dismissed, all marked as unfounded or unsubstantiated. The pattern had been there all along, visible to anyone who cared to look. Nobody had looked. A patrol car drove Simone back to her Mercedes, still sitting on that dark street corner where this nightmare began. Her phone showed 43 missed calls. The recording of the entire encounter was saved and backed up. She sat in her car for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, processing everything that had happened. Tomorrow, she would file formal complaints with the police department, the state attorney general, and the FBI's Civil Rights Division. She would document every detail while it remained fresh. She would use her position and her knowledge of the system to ensure this wasn't buried or dismissed. But tonight, she just wanted to go home. The drive took 15 minutes. Her house was dark and quiet. She walked inside, kicked off her heels, and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had occurred. The violation, the humiliation, the rage. But mostly, she thought about all the people this had happened to who weren't federal judges, who didn't know their rights, who didn't have the resources or knowledge to fight back, who ended up with criminal records, lost jobs, damaged lives. All because of officers like Brennan, who saw certain people as inherently suspicious, inherently criminal. The next morning started early. Simone's phone rang at 6:30, with her clerk calling to confirm she'd heard the recording and asking what needed to be done. By 7, Simone was composing a formal complaint. By 8, she was on a conference call with the FBI's Civil Rights Division. By 9, the story had leaked to the press. Local news picked it up first. Federal judge arrested in questionable DUI stop. Then regional outlets. Then national. By noon, footage that didn't come from the police dash cam began circulating online. A resident whose house faced that intersection had a security camera that captured the entire traffic stop. The video showed everything. Simone's calm compliance, Brennan's aggressive escalation, the lack of any impairment. The footage went viral within hours, viewed millions of times. Public reaction was swift and fierce. The police chief held a press conference that same afternoon. He stood behind a podium bearing the department's seal, looking visibly uncomfortable as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Chief Raymond spoke in carefully measured tones about how they took these allegations seriously and had immediately placed Officer Brennan on administrative leave pending a full investigation. He emphasized their commitment to professional standards and community trust. The words rang hollow to anyone who'd watched the security footage. Standing in her chambers the next morning, Simone reviewed the documents that had been delivered as promised. The file on Officer Brennan was thicker than she'd anticipated. 17 complaints over 5 years. 17. Each one dismissed with variations of the same justification. Complainant uncooperative. Insufficient evidence. Officer acted within policy guidelines. She spread the reports across her desk, studying the pattern that emerged. 12 of the 17 complainants were people of color. 14 were stopped for minor traffic violations that escalated dramatically. 8 mentioned being called aggressive or threatening despite remaining calm. The pattern wasn't subtle. It was a neon sign that everyone had ignored. Her phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Judge Reeves, you don't know me, but Officer Brennan arrested me 2 years ago. Same thing happened to me. DUI charge. Failed sobriety test I never actually failed. Night in jail. I couldn't afford a good lawyer. Took a plea deal because I was terrified. Lost my job anyway. Thank you for fighting back. More messages followed throughout the day. Different numbers, similar stories. A teacher who spent 12 hours in custody. A nurse who missed her shift and got written up. A college student whose scholarship was jeopardized by an arrest record. A father who couldn't pick up his kids from school because he was being processed on bogus charges. Each story a variation on the same theme. Brennan saw what he wanted to see, manufactured evidence to support his assumptions, and the system protected him every single time. The FBI investigation moved faster than typical federal inquiries. Special Agent Victoria Lynn arrived at Simone's office 3 days after the incident, carrying a briefcase and a recorder. She was direct and thorough, spending 4 hours going through every detail of that night. What were you wearing? What time did the stop occur? Describe his exact words. How long between the field sobriety test and the breathalyzer? Did he give you the opportunity to request a blood test? Simone answered everything precisely, her legal training making her an exceptionally credible witness. She also handed over something the agent hadn't expected, a flash drive containing audio recordings from 6 other individuals who'd contacted her with similar experiences involving Brennan. All had agreed to speak with federal investigators. All wanted their stories on record. Agent Lynn's expression shifted as she reviewed the files. This isn't just one bad stop. This is systemic. We're looking at civil rights violations, false arrest, possible evidence tampering? If even half of these accounts are accurate, Officer Brennan has been operating with impunity for years. Simone leaned forward. The question isn't whether the accounts are accurate. The question is, how many complaints have to be filed before someone actually investigates? 17 complaints, Agent Lynn. 17 times someone said this officer violated their rights, and 17 times the department found nothing wrong. That's not oversight failure. That's intentional blindness. The local news cycle exploded. Investigative reporters started digging into Brennan's record, finding the same pattern Simone had identified. They interviewed people who'd been too afraid to come forward before. citizens who thought no one would believe them against a police officer's word. A restaurant manager described being pulled over while driving home from closing. A graphic designer talked about being stopped 3 times in 6 months, always released without charges, but always treated like a criminal. A high school counselor recounted an incident where Brennan searched her car for 30 minutes, convinced he'd find drugs, finding nothing but becoming angry when she asked for his badge number. The police union issued a statement defending Brennan. Officer Brennan has served this community with distinction for over a decade. These allegations are part of a coordinated attack on law enforcement. We stand behind our officer and trust the investigation will clear his name. He has the right to due process, just like any citizen. The statement was technically correct about due process, but missed the irony entirely. Brennan had denied that same due process to countless people over the years, assuming guilt and manufacturing grounds for arrest. Public pressure mounted. Community groups organized protests outside the police station. The local NAACP chapter called for Brennan's termination and a comprehensive review of the department's internal affairs procedures. City council members who'd previously stayed silent suddenly had strong opinions about accountability and reform. The mayor, facing re-election in 8 months, announced the formation of a civilian review board to examine police conduct. Simone knew political theater when she saw it, but she also understood that public attention created opportunities for actual change. 2 weeks after her arrest, the district attorney's office made an announcement. All charges against Judge Simone Reeves were being dropped with prejudice, meaning they could never be refiled. Additionally, the DA was launching a review of every case where Officer Brennan had been the arresting officer in the past 5 years. If evidence of misconduct was found, those cases would be eligible for review and potential dismissal. The decision affected hundreds of cases. Public defenders who'd watched their clients plead guilty to charges they swore were fabricated suddenly had grounds to reopen those matters. People with criminal records stemming from Brennan's arrests could petition for expungement. The ripple effects would take years to fully process. Officer Brennan's attorney released his own statement. My client maintains his innocence and looks forward to his day in court. He followed proper procedure during a routine traffic stop. The accusations against him are unfounded and motivated by anti-police sentiment. He's being made a scapegoat for larger societal issues he had no part in creating. But the evidence kept mounting. The FBI discovered that Brennan had filed reports claiming drug dogs alerted on vehicles when no canine unit had been present. He documented field sobriety tests showing impairment in cases where dashcam footage showed suspects performing flawlessly. He'd claimed suspects were aggressive or threatening in situations where video showed calm compliance. The lies weren't occasional mistakes. They were standard practice. 3 weeks in, a breaking development shifted everything. A former officer from the same precinct came forward as a whistleblower. His name was Thomas Garrett, recently retired after 28 years on the force. He contacted Agent Lynn directly and provided testimony that Brennan wasn't acting alone. According to Garrett, a group of officers had an informal competition, tracking who could make the most arrests each month. They called it the stat game. Promotions and preferred assignments went to officers with high numbers, creating incentive to manufacture arrests from routine stops. Garrett had complained to supervisors multiple times over the years. Each time, he was told to focus on his own work and stop causing problems. When he persisted, he was reassigned to less desirable shifts and passed over for advancement. He eventually stopped complaining and started counting days until retirement. Now, with pension secured and nothing left to lose, he was ready to testify about everything he'd witnessed. His testimony was devastating. He described watching Brennan and 3 other officers coordinate stories after questionable stops. He recalled supervisors coaching officers on how to write reports that would withstand scrutiny, teaching them which phrases justified searches and arrests. He provided names, dates, specific incidents. The FBI investigation expanded immediately. now targeting multiple officers and several supervisors. The department's command structure was implicated in what appeared to be institutional tolerance of civil rights violations. This wasn't a few bad apples. This was a corrupted barrel. Simone received a call from the police chief requesting a private meeting. She agreed, curious what he could possibly say at this point. They met in a neutral location, a conference room at the courthouse. Chief Raymond looked exhausted, his face drawn and eyes shadowed. "Judge Reeves, I want to apologize personally, not as chief, but as someone who failed in his responsibility to ensure his officers operated with integrity. I should have seen this. The signs were there." Simone's expression remained neutral. "Chief Raymond, with respect, you did see this. 17 complaints against one officer, multiple complaints against others, former officers trying to report misconduct. You didn't fail to see it. You chose to ignore it because addressing it would have been difficult and uncomfortable." "There's a difference." He nodded slowly, accepting the rebuke. "You're right, and I'm not asking for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I'm here to tell you that I'm implementing immediate changes. Mandatory body cameras for all officers, activated during every citizen interaction. Independent review of all use of force incidents. Revised training protocols emphasizing de-escalation. A genuine civilian oversight board with subpoena power. These changes should have happened years ago, but they're happening now." Simone studied him carefully. "Those are good steps, Chief. But policies mean nothing without enforcement and accountability. The real question is whether officers who violate those policies will face actual consequences, or whether the system will continue protecting them." The chief had no answer to that, because they both knew the answer depended on factors beyond his control. Culture, politics, union contracts, qualified immunity, the blue wall of silence. Changing policy was easy. Changing culture was the hard part. Officer Brennan's trial began 6 months after his arrest. The courtroom was packed with media, activists, community members, and off-duty officers showing support for their colleague. Simone sat in the gallery, watching quietly as prosecutors presented their case. The evidence was overwhelming. Body camera footage showed Brennan planting drugs during traffic stops on 3 separate occasions. Dashboard camera footage from his patrol car captured him coaching his partner on how to justify searches that had no legal basis. Text messages revealed conversations about quotas and the stat game that former Officer Garrett had described. But the most damaging testimony came from victims. 7 people took the stand to describe their encounters with Brennan. A college student arrested for possession after Brennan planted a baggie during a routine speeding stop. A single mother who lost custody of her children after a fabricated drug arrest led to child services involvement. A man who spent 14 months in jail awaiting trial for charges that were eventually dismissed when surveillance footage contradicted Brennan's reports. Each testimony painted the same picture: an officer who viewed citizens, particularly citizens of color, as targets rather than people deserving protection. Someone who manufactured crimes to boost his statistics, advance his career, and satisfy supervisors demanding results. The defense strategy was predictable. They attacked the credibility of witnesses, suggested video evidence was taken out of context, and portrayed Brennan as a dedicated officer who made difficult, split-second decisions in dangerous situations. They brought character witnesses, fellow officers who testified about Brennan's professionalism and dedication. But the jury wasn't buying it. After just 9 hours of deliberation, they returned guilty verdicts on all counts: conspiracy to violate civil rights, falsification of evidence, perjury, deprivation of rights under color of law. Brennan showed no emotion as the verdicts were read. His wife sobbed quietly in the front row. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. Federal guidelines suggested 12 to 15 years. The prosecution asked for the maximum, arguing that Brennan had betrayed his oath and destroyed lives for personal advancement. The defense begged for leniency, highlighting his years of service and previously clean record. The judge, a woman named Elena Vasquez, who had spent 20 years on the federal bench, delivered a scathing statement before announcing the sentence. Officer Brennan, you were entrusted with extraordinary power. The power to detain, to search, to arrest, to use force. That power exists because society trusts that officers will exercise it responsibly and lawfully. You violated that trust repeatedly and deliberately. You manufactured evidence, lied under oath, and destroyed lives to advance your career. The harm you caused is immeasurable. Families separated, reputations destroyed, years of freedom stolen. And for what? Better performance reviews? Preferred assignments? Your actions didn't just harm your victims. They harmed every honest officer who does this job with integrity. They harmed community trust in law enforcement. They harmed the justice system itself. Judge Vasquez sentenced Brennan to 18 years in federal prison, 3 years above the guideline maximum. The courtroom erupted. Officers in attendance stood and walked out in protest. Community members applauded until Vasquez gavelled them into silence. Brennan's wife collapsed into her attorney's arms. But Brennan wasn't the only one facing consequences. The 3 other officers implicated in the stat game were indicted on similar charges. 2 took plea deals, agreeing to testify against supervisors in exchange for reduced sentences. The 3rd chose to fight and lost, receiving a 14-year sentence after trial. 4 supervisors were also charged. They faced counts of conspiracy and obstruction for their roles in encouraging and covering up misconduct. The trials revealed a systematic effort to boost arrest numbers regardless of legality. Supervisors had created informal reward systems, offering preferred shifts and overtime opportunities to officers with high statistics. They had coached officers on report writing, teaching them phrases that would justify legally questionable stops and searches. During one supervisor's trial, prosecutors presented an internal training document titled Effective Report Writing for Court Viability. The document explicitly instructed officers to use specific language in reports to overcome legal challenges. It suggested phrases like furtive movements and appeared nervous that could justify searches. It advised officers to always include statements about detecting odors of marijuana or observing suspicious bulges that might indicate weapons. The document was devastating evidence of institutional corruption. It proved supervisors weren't just tolerating misconduct, they were actively training officers to circumvent constitutional protections. All 4 supervisors were convicted. Sentences ranged from 8 to 12 years. The police chief who had met with Simone announced his resignation the day after the final verdict, though he faced no criminal charges. His resignation letter contained no apology, just vague statements about allowing new leadership to guide the department forward. The civil cases moved forward simultaneously. Simone's lawsuit expanded into a class action representing 43 people who had been arrested by Brennan and the other implicated officers. The city fought initially, denying systemic problems and claiming the convicted officers were anomalies. But discovery revealed otherwise. Internal affairs records showed hundreds of complaints over a 10-year period that were dismissed or inadequately investigated. Performance evaluations explicitly rewarded officers for high arrest numbers, without any quality control to ensure those arrests were legitimate. Training materials emphasized enforcement over community relations. Faced with overwhelming evidence, the city agreed to settle. The total payout exceeded $30 million, distributed among class members based on the severity of harm they'd suffered. People who had been arrested but not charged received smaller amounts. Those who had been charged received more. People who had served jail time or lost jobs and housing received the largest settlements. Simone's portion was substantial, though she donated most of it to organizations working on criminal justice reform. Money couldn't undo what happened, couldn't restore the 2 years of her life spent fighting charges that should never have existed. But it could fund work to prevent others from experiencing the same nightmare. The consent decree imposed on the department was comprehensive. Mandatory body cameras with severe penalties for officers who failed to activate them. Independent investigation of all use-of-force incidents. Revised training emphasizing constitutional rights and de-escalation. A civilian oversight board with genuine authority to investigate complaints and recommend discipline. Annual audits of arrest patterns to identify potential racial bias. Implementation was rocky. The police union challenged several provisions, arguing they interfered with officer safety and operational flexibility. Some officers left the department rather than work under new restrictions. Others continued operating as they always had, betting that enforcement of new policies would be inconsistent. But slowly, measurably, things began to change. Complaints decreased, use-of-force incidents dropped, community surveys showed incremental improvement in trust. It wasn't transformation, but it was movement in the right direction. Simone returned to her life, though fundamentally altered. She changed careers, leaving corporate work to attend law school. She graduated 3 years later and joined a nonprofit legal organization representing people in situations similar to hers. She became an expert on police misconduct litigation and testified before legislative committees about needed reforms. She never forgot what happened in that parking lot. The feeling of handcuffs, the humiliation of being arrested in front of neighbors, the terror of facing prison for something she didn't do. Those memories fueled her work, driving her to fight for others who lacked resources or knowledge to fight for themselves. 8 years after her arrest, Simone received an unexpected letter. It was from Brennan, writing from federal prison. The letter was brief. He didn't apologize. He didn't claim innocence. He simply stated that he'd had time to think about his actions and the people he'd harmed. He said he understood why she couldn't forgive him. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He just wanted her to know that he thought about what he'd done, and he was sorry. Simone read the letter twice, then filed it away. She didn't respond. Some wounds don't heal with apologies, especially ones that come after consequence rather than conscience. Brennan's regret, if genuine, was his to carry. What mattered more was ensuring the system that enabled him was dismantled, that future officers understood the badge wasn't a license for abuse, that communities had mechanisms to hold police accountable, that people like her, standing in parking lots minding their own business, didn't become casualties of someone else's ambition. The fight wasn't over. Systems don't change because of one lawsuit or one trial. But every verdict, every settlement, every policy reform added weight to the scale. Justice wasn't a destination. It was constant pressure applied in the right direction. Simone thought about that night often, the feeling of cold metal against her wrists, the humiliation of standing handcuffed while neighbors watched, the calculated cruelty in Brennan's voice when he mocked her credentials. Those memories never fully faded, but they transformed into something else. Fuel. She used them every time she walked into a courtroom representing someone who'd been railroaded by officers who thought badges made them untouchable. Every time she testified before legislators about qualified immunity and accountability. Every time she trained young lawyers on civil rights litigation. The night that nearly destroyed her life became the foundation for work that would protect thousands of others. The system that enabled Brennan didn't disappear overnight. Culture change moves slower than policy change. But the consent decree forced into place after the trials created cracks in the wall. Body cameras became mandatory. Civilian oversight gained real teeth. Officers started understanding that their actions had consequences beyond internal review boards designed to protect them. Years later, walking through that same neighborhood where everything happened, Simone would sometimes drive past the intersection where Brennan pulled her over. The street looked exactly the same. Same houses, same streetlights, same stop sign. But everything had changed beneath the surface. The department operated differently. Officers thought twice before manufacturing probable cause. Communities had mechanisms to fight back. Perfect? No. Better? Measurably. That's what justice looks like in the real world. Not dramatic courtroom moments or tearful apologies, just incremental pressure applied consistently over time until the corrupt foundation cracks and something stronger gets built in its place. Brennan sat in a federal prison cell, thinking about what he'd lost. The officers who followed his example faced their own consequences. The supervisors who enabled them learned that looking away had a price. And Simone Harper, the woman who refused to be silent in that parking lot, became the architect of reforms that would outlast everyone involved. Because the real victory wasn't one verdict or one settlement. It was changing the calculation, making officers understand that the next person they harass might be someone who fights back, someone who knows their rights, someone who has the resources and knowledge to burn their career to the ground. That fear, that uncertainty, that accountability creates the space where actual justice becomes possible. Now, watching footage like this, it can really stick with you, right? Some of these clips stay in your head, especially late at night when you're trying to fall asleep. And speaking of sleep, a lot of you have told me you're waking up at 2 or 3 a.m. and just lying there. Can't shut your mind off. And the next day, you're dragging through everything. I came across a simple 21-day sleep guide that's helped thousands of people fix exactly that. No pills, no apps, no gadgets. Just a step-by-step plan that actually works. It's only $15. I put the link in the description if you want to check it out. All right, I'll catch you in the next one.
Driven by the pursuit of truth, our mission is to demand transparency and hold power to account. We trust in hard evidence because the records do not lie. Thank you for watching and staying informed.